The sky hung heavy that night, a bruised shade of purple and gray that looked as if the heavens themselves were holding their breath. The wind swept across the barren plain, carrying the dry scent of dust and rain that never came. Each rumble of thunder rolled like the slow heartbeat of the earth, deep, old, alive. Around a small fire in the center of a quiet village, children huddled close, eyes wide and faces glowing orange in the dancing light. Their laughter had faded, replaced by the soft, crackling hush that comes when fear and wonder meet. Across from them sat an old man with eyes as sharp as lightning and hands marked by time. He leaned forward, his voice a gravelly whisper. "Listen closely," he said, his tone heavy with both warning and awe. "This is not a tale of heroes or of gods. It's a story of a boy who danced with lightning and became something far greater. The flames flickered, and the shadows behind him grew long and wild. They say it happened long ago, when the storms still had names," the old man continued, "when thunder spoke and the sky itself could love or hate you. In those days, the earth was dry, the people hungry, and the storms, oh, they were cruel." The children exchanged glances, shivering as another rumble echoed across the hills. The storyteller smiled faintly, his eyes glimmering with memory. In a forgotten village beyond the mountains, there lived a boy who did not run from thunder. While others hid, he stood in the rain and lifted his arms to the sky. Some called him brave, most called him cursed. A pause, only the sound of the fire breathing. They say lightning sought him out, followed him. That one night, when the storm came closer than it ever had before, the boy did not hide. He danced. A child gasped softly. And when the light fell, the old man said, his voice dropping to a murmur, "The storm took him, but it did not kill him. It made him its own." For a moment, the fire flared brighter, as if the storm itself had heard. The storyteller leaned back, his gaze drifting toward the horizon where thunder rolled again. "Remember this, little ones," he whispered. "Some storms aren't meant to be feared, only understood." The fire crackled, fading into silence as his words hung in the air. Beyond the village walls, thunder murmured once more, distant, but alive, and with that sound, the story slipped backward through time to a small mountain village and a boy named Kyle, who was born beneath a storm. The village of Rin's Hollow rested at the foot of the northern cliffs, where the mountains met the endless sky. The people who lived there worked the soil with cracked hands and bowed heads, forever watching the clouds. The land gave little, and when it gave too much, rain, thunder, flood, it took back twice as hard. Every roof was patched with tin, every heart stitched with loss. For in Rin's Hollow, storms were not just weather, they were memory, and in that village lived a boy named Kyle, small, curious, and restless. His hair was the color of late wheat, and his eyes a stormy gray that never seemed to settle. The other children played in the dirt or carved toys from wood, but Kyle was different. He watched the skies. He listened to thunder the way others listened to songs. They said he was born during the loudest storm in 20 years. The lightning had struck 3 trees the night his mother screamed him into the world. Some swore the storm had spoken his name before he could even breathe. His mother, Mira, never liked to hear such talk. She loved her son fiercely, but carried a shadow behind her eyes. Years ago, her husband, Kyle's father, had gone out to sea when the sky was already turning black. He promised to return before the rain, but the storm came faster than any could remember. His ship never reached shore. Mira had begged him not to go that day, and when the sea took him, she blamed herself and the storm. She feared the sky, and feared even more that her boy shared its temper. "Stay away from the cliffs when it rains," she told Kale again and again. "The storm doesn't love us. It only takes." But Kale never listened for long. He liked to climb the rocky ridges above the village and feel the wind pull at his clothes. He'd stretch his arms wide, pretending the world could lift him. Sometimes, when thunder rolled through the valley, he thought he could hear a hum deep inside his chest. Faint, but real. The villagers whispered when they saw him. "That's Mira's boy," they said. "The storm-marked one. He'll bring lightning down on us all." The words followed Kale like shadows. Still, he didn't hate them. He only wondered why the sky frightened everyone so much. Then, one night, everything changed. The air was thick and hot, heavy with the smell of rain waiting to fall. A wall of black clouds crept over the mountains, silent and slow. Kyle stood by the window as the first drops hit the roof, sharp and cold. His mother barred the door, whispering prayers under her breath. But Kale could not stay still. Something called to him. Not a voice, not exactly, but a pull, deep and electric, as if the storm itself were reaching for him. When lightning flashed, he saw the cliffs glow white in the distance. He couldn't look away. Mira's voice broke through the thunder. "Kale, don't even think about it." But the wind answered louder. Before he knew it, Kyle was outside, running barefoot through the mud, the rain slicing across his skin. The night exploded in light and sound. The thunder wasn't frightening. It was beautiful. When he reached the cliff's edge, he stopped, chest heaving. Below, the forest swayed in waves of silver and black. Another bolt tore through the sky and struck a tree not far from him. The trunk split apart in flames, sparks flying into the wind. Kyle didn't run. He stepped closer. The air buzzed around him, sharp, alive, and warm. The light still danced in his eyes. He swore, in that single heartbeat, he heard it. A whisper in the crackle of the storm. It said his name, Kyle. He blinked, trembling, unsure if it was real. But his heart pounded in rhythm with the thunder. The sound filled his chest, a deep drumming that seemed to answer the storm's call. Then, as suddenly as it had come, the rain eased. The lightning moved farther away, fading into the hills. Kale stood soaked, breathless, and changed in a way he didn't yet understand. When he finally returned home, his mother's face was pale with fear. She wrapped him in a blanket and said nothing. But that night, as he lay awake, he couldn't stop hearing the whisper of the storm in his mind, calling him back, softly, patiently. And in his dreams, he saw himself standing beneath a sky of white fire, a boy dancing with lightning. The storm came back 3 nights later. The villagers had gone inside early, shutters bolted, fires low. But Kale couldn't sleep. The thunder outside was too loud, too alive. Each flash of light painted the ceiling white for a moment, and every rumble shook the walls like a voice calling his name. He lay still at first, clutching his blanket, but the pull returned, that strange tug deep inside him, the one that made his heartbeat race faster with every crack of thunder. He slipped from bed and crept past his mother's room. She was sleeping lightly, a candle burning beside her, her lips moving with silent prayers. For a moment he hesitated. He wanted to stay, to be the good son who obeyed. But the storm was calling, and the call was stronger than fear. Kyle stepped into the night. The rain hit him at once, cold, sharp, alive. The wind roared through the valley, carrying the smell of salt and lightning. Every step he took through the mud felt like walking into something sacred and dangerous. He climbed the rocky path toward the cliffs, the one his mother had forbidden him to ever touch during a storm. The thunder rolled again, closer now, like the sound of 1,000 drums. His heart answered each beat. When he reached the top, the world opened before him, the sky black and wide, the land below trembling beneath the wind. He could barely breathe for the beauty of it. The rain stung his face as he spread his arms wide. His small frame stood silhouetted against the glowing clouds. "I'm not afraid," he whispered into the wind. "If you want me, then take me." The air thickened. The sky brightened. Then, for one breathless second, silence. And the world split apart. Lightning fell like a blade from heaven. The sound cracked through the air so loud it felt like the sky itself had broken. The ground beneath Kale's feet flashed white. He didn't scream. He didn't even have time to. The bolt struck near him, blinding and pure. For a single heartbeat, everything stopped. No sound, no pain, no movement. He felt himself lifted, weightless in the bright silence, wrapped in something that wasn't fire but light, warm, endless, and full of power. It didn't hurt. It sang. It sang to him in the same whisper he'd heard before. The voice of the storm, the rhythm of the world itself. Then came the fall. When Kale woke, it was dawn. The rain had stopped. Mist drifted across the cliffs, glowing gold in the first light of morning. He lay on the ground, soaked but breathing. Every inch of his body tingled, alive with strange warmth. He sat up slowly. His clothes were scorched at the edges, but he was unhurt. His reflection in a pool of water made him freeze. His hair, once the color of wheat, was now pale white, glowing faintly in the sun. And his eyes, they shimmered like lightning caught in glass. He touched his arm and found a mark running from his shoulder to his wrist, thin, jagged, and bright, like a scar of light. It pulsed softly, beating in rhythm with his heart. He felt the hum again, the same one that echoed in the thunder. Only now it was inside him. Down in the valley, the world seemed different. Birds circled overhead, calling strangely, as if drawn to him. He raised his hand, and for an instant, the air around his fingers sparked blue. A small gasp escaped his lips. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. When he finally stumbled home, his mother was waiting at the door, eyes wide with fear. She ran to him, pulling him into her arms, checking for wounds. Her hands froze when she saw the white hair and the glowing mark. "What did you do?" she whispered, voice trembling. "Kale, what have you done?" He tried to explain, but how could he? How could he tell her that the storm had chosen him, that it had wrapped him in its light and left him alive? That night, the village came to their door. They'd seen the lightning strike the cliffs, the strange glow afterward, and when they saw Kale, their whispers turned to gasps. Cursed. Touched by the storm. His father angered the sea. Now the boy brings the sky's wrath. Kale stood silent, clutching his mother's hand. Her fingers trembled against his. When they were finally alone, she looked at him with tears in her eyes. "You must hide this," she said. "Never show them what you can do." "Promise me, Kale." He nodded. But the promise burned like a lie on his tongue, because even as he spoke, the storm was still inside him, alive, whispering, waiting. And for the first time in his life, Kale didn't feel cursed. He felt alive. The days after the storm were strange. At first, the villagers kept their distance. They watched Kyle from doorways and fields, whispering behind their hands. Some made signs to ward off evil when he passed. Others simply stared, afraid, curious, uncertain. Kale tried to pretend nothing had changed, but everything had. The hum inside him never stopped. He could hear it in his heartbeat, feel it under his skin. Sometimes, when he grew upset, sparks flickered from his fingers, tiny flashes that died before they touched the air. Other times, he'd wake in the middle of the night to the faint sound of thunder, even when the sky was clear. He knew the storms were speaking to him. He could feel their moods, restless, angry, or calm. When he felt joy, the clouds above the valley seemed to clear. When he felt sadness, the sky darkened, and when he felt fear, lightning rippled along the horizon. Mira saw it too. Her son's white hair gleamed like frost in the morning light, and the scar along his arm glowed faintly when he was near the window. She tried to act as if everything was normal, but she couldn't hide her worry. "Kyle," she said softly one morning, "the people are afraid. You must control it. You must learn to be still." He tried. He really did. But how do you silence the sky inside you? The weeks passed, and the storms grew stronger. Fields flooded, crops wilted, and the villagers began to whisper that Kyle's power had angered the gods. One afternoon, as thunder rolled overhead, Kyle sat by the cliffs again. He closed his eyes, reaching inward for that spark. The hum rose, soft at first, then louder, a steady rhythm that matched the beating of his heart. He lifted his hand, and a faint light danced along his skin. The sky answered. Clouds swirled faster, thunder cracking like applause. But control was a fragile thing. When fear entered him, fear of losing it, fear of being seen, the lightning flared without warning. It struck a tree below, splitting it in half. The sound echoed across the valley like the roar of a beast. Kale gasped, dropping to his knees. The smell of smoke filled the air. He hadn't meant to, but it was too late. By nightfall, the villagers were at his door. Torches lit their faces with orange anger. "He brought this upon us," one shouted. "The boy calls storms like a witch." Kale stood frozen as Mira stepped in front of him. "He's just a child," she pleaded. "He means no harm." But her words were drowned out by the roar of the crowd. "If he stays, we'll lose everything." The storm above them rumbled, as if echoing their fear. Lightning flashed, far away, yet near enough to make the villagers flinch. Kyle looked into their eyes and saw no kindness, no trust, only fear. Something broke inside him that night. He turned to his mother. Her eyes were full of tears. Love and sorrow mixed together. "Go," she whispered. "Before they hurt you." He wanted to stay, to fight. But he couldn't bear to see her cry again. He left before dawn. The mountains welcomed him with silence. For days, he wandered the ridges, sleeping under trees, drinking from streams. The storms followed him. Never close enough to strike, but always near enough to see. He began to test his gift in secret. He learned how to call thunder without lightning, how to draw small sparks from stone, how to calm a storm by slowing his own heartbeat. The more he practiced, the stronger he grew, but the more he felt himself drifting away from the boy he once was. His laughter faded. His voice grew quiet. When he looked into pools of water, the eyes that looked back at him seemed older, colder, full of light. He had become part of the storm, and the storm had become part of him. One evening, as dark clouds rolled over the mountains, Kyle heard shouting below. A caravan had been caught on the road. Wagons overturned, horses panicking. The wind howled, the rain fell in sheets, and lightning danced across the sky. Without thinking, Kyle ran toward them. The travelers were huddled together, their torches snuffed out by the rain. A bolt of lightning struck nearby, sending them screaming to the ground. Kale raised his hands instinctively. "Please," he whispered to the sky. "Not them. Not this time." He closed his eyes and felt the storm within him surge. His body trembled as he reached for the energy above, not to summon, but to guide. He lifted his arms and the thunder softened. Lightning forked in two, striking harmlessly into the hills instead of the road. The wind eased. The rain slowed. When Kyle opened his eyes, the travelers stared at him in stunned silence. A faint glow lingered around his body. Not bright, but enough to make their hearts tremble. He turned to leave before they could speak, but one of them whispered, "He saved us." The boy commands the storm. By morning, that whisper had become a story. By the end of the week, it had crossed the mountains. People spoke of a pale-haired youth who could call down rain or turn aside lightning with his hands. Some called him blessed, others called him divine. And though Kyle lived alone in the high ridges, every time the thunder rolled, people knelt and whispered his name like a prayer. The boy who commands the storm. But Kyle, sitting beneath the endless sky, felt only the weight of it all. The loneliness, the power, the endless whisper of the storm that never let him rest. He had wanted to understand the sky. Now he was bound to it. And somewhere, deep inside, a quiet truth began to take root. Power, no matter how pure, always asks for something in return. Years passed. The storms came and went like seasons, and Kael grew into a young man. Tall, quiet, with eyes that no longer feared the sky. His name had spread beyond the valleys, carried by merchants and travelers who spoke of the storm-touched one, the youth who could calm the wrath of nature with a gesture. But Kyle lived far from the world's noise. He had made a home in a cave high above the valley, where the wind carved the rock into song. There, he learned the language of storms, how to hear their stories, how to call rain to thirsty earth, how to hold back destruction when anger rose in the clouds. And yet, every act of mercy carved away a little more of his peace. The power inside him was not meant to be kind. It was wild, restless, hungry. The more he used it, the more it demanded. He began to wonder if he truly controlled the lightning, or if it controlled him. One night, as the storm clouds slept and the stars shimmered like dust, Kale saw torches moving across the distant plain. A procession of riders, their banners tattered, their armor dulled by sand. He felt the faint pulse of despair carried on the wind. Grief, hunger, and the scent of desperation. When they reached his mountain, their leader dismounted. She was young, though her eyes looked older than any storm Kale had ever seen. "I am Elira," she said, voice trembling with the weight of pride barely holding back exhaustion. "Queen of the lowlands, or what's left of them." Kyle said nothing. He only watched her, the faint light of his cave glimmering on his white hair and lightning-marked arm. "Our rivers have dried," she continued. "Our crops are dust. My people pray to the sky, but it no longer answers." Her gaze lifted to the dark horizon. "They say you can make the heavens listen, that you are not cursed, but chosen." Kyle turned toward the valley, where dry winds carried the scent of death. "The storm doesn't answer to anyone," he said softly. "It listens only when it wishes to." "Then teach me to make it listen," she said, "or my people will die." Her voice cracked on the last word, and something in Kale's chest stirred. A memory of his mother, of the frightened villagers, of the boy who had once begged the sky to hear him. He hesitated. Then he nodded once. For 3 days, Kale and Elira climbed the mountain peaks together. He showed her how to feel the pulse beneath her feet, how to listen for the low hum that slept inside the earth. They stood beneath empty skies, waiting for storms that never came. Elira was stubborn, fierce as a blade drawn in defiance of fate. But she was mortal, and the mountains had no mercy. Her strength began to fade. One night, as she sat by the fire shivering, she whispered, "You speak to the sky as if it's alive." Kale looked into the flames. "It is, and it chose you?" He hesitated. "It chose me once, but I don't know if it still does." Elira studied him in silence. "Maybe it never chose you to serve it," she said softly. "Maybe it chose you to change it." Her words echoed long after she fell asleep. On the 4th day, the storm came. It began as a whisper, a distant murmur that grew until the air itself seemed to tremble. The wind roared across the cliffs, and the sky split open, spilling silver fire into the clouds. Kale stood with his arms raised, the storm answering his call. The thunder rolled in waves, rain hissing against the stone. Elira fell to her knees, shouting over the wind, "Bring the rain to my kingdom!" Kale's power surged, his mark burning bright as molten gold. Lightning spun through his hands, alive, wild. He reached for the storm, and it reached back. But this time, it did not come gently. It came hungry. The energy slammed into him, a torrent of light that filled his chest and tore through his veins. He screamed, the sky flashing with every heartbeat. The rain began to fall, first in drops, then in sheets, rolling down the mountain toward the parched plains below. But Kyle felt himself unraveling. The storm wanted more. It wanted his body, his soul, his surrender. Elira ran to him, grasping his arm. "Stop! You'll kill yourself!" He looked at her, his eyes bright as lightning. "If I stop, it all dies," she shook her head, tears lost to the rain. "Then let me share it." Kyle stared at her, stunned, and in that moment, she placed her hand on his scar. The lightning leapt between them for an instant. The world turned white. When the light faded, Kyle was on his knees, breathing hard, and the rain was pouring freely. Not from his will, but from the sky's own release. The storm had been gentled. The plains below shimmered with life again. Elira stood before him, her hair soaked, her eyes wide with awe, and the faint trace of light now running along her own arm. "You gave it to me," she whispered. Kyle nodded weakly. "Not gave, shared." He smiled faintly, though exhaustion dragged at him. "Now, the storm will listen to more than one voice." Elira bowed her head. "Then the storm will serve not one man's legend, but a kingdom's hope." As dawn rose over the wet earth, Kyle looked to the horizon, where thunder rolled softly. Not in anger, but in peace. The storm had spared them, but deep inside he felt the truth stir again. Power shared is never lost. It only changes the hearts it touches. And so began the legend of the Storm-Bearer Queen, and the boy who taught her how to speak to the sky. But Kale's journey was not over. For somewhere far beyond the mountains, darker clouds were gathering, storms not born of nature, but of man. And soon, even the sky would demand its due. Years passed again, and the world changed with them. The drought ended. The rivers returned, the crops flourished, and songs filled the air once more. In every town, children whispered of the Stormbringer, the man who spoke to the sky and gave it mercy. Statues rose in his honor. Coins bore his image. Stories painted him as both a god and a ghost. But Kale, the boy who once danced beneath thunder, had grown weary. Every time he called a storm, it cost him something unseen. His body ached as if burned from the inside. His hair, once pale gold, had turned silver white, and his eyes, once bright with curiosity, were now dimmed by memory. He had given everything to the sky, and it had taken its price. Kale lived now within the Queen's citadel, surrounded by marble halls and endless praise. Yet he found no comfort there. The voices that called him savior were the same that once called him curse. He had learned that love built on fear was never love at all. Queen Elira had not forgotten him. Her heart was full of gratitude and guilt. She visited him often, her crown set aside, her voice softer when she was near him. "You gave us rain," she said once, gazing out the window where the clouds drifted like sleeping giants. "You gave us life," Kale smiled faintly. "And what did it cost?" She hesitated. "You saved more lives than any king before you." "Maybe," he said quietly. "But every storm I bring takes a little of mine." Her eyes filled with sorrow. "Then stop. Let the skies rest. Kyle turned away. The skies never rest. Time blurred. The people's awe turned to dependency, and dependency turned to demand. Whenever crops failed or armies marched, they looked to the Stormbringer. They prayed for his thunder to answer them, not to heal, but to conquer. And soon the Queen's Council began to whisper. One evening, Kale stood before them. Men wrapped in silk and ambition, they bowed low, their words smooth as oil. "You hold the heavens in your hands," said Lord Darwin, the Queen's most trusted advisor. "With your power, our borders could stretch beyond the mountains. No enemy could stand against a storm." Kyle frowned. "The sky isn't a weapon." Darwin smiled coldly. "Everything can be a weapon. In the right hands." Kyle turned his back. "Then may you never find those hands." After that day, things changed. The Queen grew distant. Rumors spread through the court that Kale was no longer loyal, that the storms he summoned were growing darker. The people still adored him, but they feared him too. Whispers echoed through the streets. What if he turned the storm against us? Kale began to feel the walls close in, and then came the night of betrayal. He awoke to the sound of soldiers at his door. They entered without a word, their armor glinting like lightning in torchlight. The Queen followed behind, her eyes full of tears. "Why?" Kale asked quietly, his voice steady, almost calm. Illyra's lips trembled. "They've taken your mother, Kale. Your village. If you don't obey them." She couldn't finish. Lord Darwin stepped forward. "Summon a storm. Not for rain, for war. Show the enemy the wrath of the heavens, and your people will live." Kale's hands trembled. "You'd make the sky into your soldier?" "For peace," Darwin said smoothly. "Sometimes peace requires fear." Kyle's eyes met the Queen's. She said nothing, only turned away, as if unable to bear the weight of what she'd done. He lowered his head. "If I do this," he said softly, "there will be no coming back." Darwin smiled. "Then make it a storm worth remembering." That night, Kyle stood alone in the tower, looking toward the horizon. The stars were gone, swallowed by clouds that seemed to wait for his command. He could feel his mother's voice echoing in his heart. "Run from the rain, Kyle. Promise me." But he couldn't run anymore. He had become the storm. He whispered to the sky, "One last dance," and the clouds answered with thunder. Lightning crawled across the heavens, shaping itself into a crown of fire. The wind howled like 1,000 lost souls. The ground trembled beneath his feet. The soldiers below watched in awe and fear as Kale raised his arms and drew the lightning to him, shaping it, holding it back like a leash around chaos itself. He could end everything in that moment. He could bring peace or ruin. But in his heart, Kale already knew what he would choose. The power was not meant to destroy. It was meant to free. And if the world demanded a weapon, he would give them a legend instead. The battlefield stretched like a scar across the land. Dry earth cracked beneath a bruised sky. The air was heavy, trembling, waiting. At the center stood Kyle. Chains bound his wrists and ankles, the iron blackened by heat. His silver hair clung to his face, wet with sweat and rain. Around him, soldiers waited in tense silence. The Queen's army on one side, the enemy's banners dark on the other. Above them, clouds boiled and twisted, their edges lit by a sickly blue glow. The storm was coming, drawn not by nature, but by him. Lord Darwin's voice echoed through the wind. "Now, Stormbringer, show them what your power can do." Kale said nothing. His eyes lifted toward the swirling clouds, his heartbeat slow. steady, almost peaceful. He had spent years fighting to understand the gift inside him, to control it, to use it for good. But now he understood the truth. He was never meant to command the storm. He was meant to become it. Lightning flashed across the horizon, spreading like veins of living light. The air burned with electricity, and the soldiers began to whisper, stepping back in fear. Cale closed his eyes. He thought of his mother, her trembling hands, her voice begging him to stay away from the cliffs. He thought of the Queen, her desperate eyes, her hope, her sorrow. He thought of the boy he once was, fragile, curious, unafraid of thunder. A small, broken smile crossed his face. "I'm not cursed," he whispered. "I'm coming home." The first bolt struck the ground beside him. The second struck his chains. The third struck him. A blinding flash swallowed the sky. For a moment, all sound vanished. Time itself seemed to stop. Then the world exploded. Thunder roared like 1,000 drums, and lightning cascaded in every direction. The soldiers fell to their knees, covering their faces as wind and fire danced through the air. Yet the storm did not destroy them. Cale had guided it, not toward vengeance, but toward release. The lightning swept across the battlefield, melting swords, breaking armor, and lifting the scent of rain into the air. When it was over, the sky opened and rain poured down, soft, cleansing, endless. The storm had not come to kill. It had come to forgive. When the clouds parted, the chains lay empty. Only Cale's footprints remained, glowing faintly in the mud before fading into light. Above, the last bolt of lightning tore through the clouds. And for an instant, those who looked up swore they saw him. A figure of light, spinning, weightless, dancing. Then he was gone. The Queen fell to her knees, her crown lost in the mud. Tears mixed with the rain as she whispered, "Forgive me." And the thunder, distant but clear, seemed to answer with a sound like a heartbeat. The war ended that day. For 7 nights and 7 days, rain fell without pause. The rivers filled, the land healed, and the world remembered. But whenever the sky darkened and thunder rolled through the mountains, those who listened closely would swear they heard laughter, light and free, carried by the wind. The fire crackled softly beneath the old storyteller's hands. Sparks leapt into the air, glowing like tiny stars before fading into the dark. Around him, a circle of children huddled close, their faces lit by the flames and wide with wonder. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, low and gentle, like the purr of an ancient beast. The storyteller smiled. His voice, worn but steady, carried over the wind. "And so," he said, "the boy who danced with lightning gave his final gift to the world. Peace." The children were silent. The smallest one frowned, tugging at his sleeve. "But Elder," she asked, "was he real? Was there truly a boy who could speak to the storm?" The old man chuckled softly, his eyes glimmering like rain on stone. "Real," he said. "Ah, child, what is real?" He leaned closer to the fire, watching the smoke curl toward the stars. "The mountains still whisper his name when the wind is strong. The rivers that once ran dry now sing because of him. And when lightning dances across the sky, look closely. You might see him there, spinning in the storm, laughing with the thunder." The children gasped, eyes shining. Another boy whispered, "Do you think he's happy now?" The old man's smile softened. "Yes," he said quietly. "He was born from the storm, but he found peace in the rain." He poked at the fire, and the flames flared bright. For a moment, the light reflected in his eyes. And in that flicker, one might almost believe they saw a streak of silver hair a faint glow like lightning trapped beneath the skin. Outside, thunder rolled again. The rain began to fall, slow, steady, gentle. The storyteller looked to the horizon, where the clouds gathered like old friends. He raised his hand, as if in greeting. "Some legends," he murmured, "burn out and fade away." A pause. The lightning flashed, painting the sky white for a heartbeat. But others, he smiled faintly, become the storm. The fire hissed as rain touched the embers, and far beyond the village, in the heart of the sky, a bolt of lightning leapt across the clouds. And for the briefest moment, it moved like a dancer, wild and free.